I'm Turk Strawman at Thank you, Amatraga. Thank you for selecting this video on whether you become a, well, it does spiritual unfoldment, recognition, realization, manifestation of the true self, self-mastery. Is there a point at which, in the movement towards those, right, at which you arrive at some level of perfection? When do you become a perfect being? Before I continue, activate the notification bell feature while you subscribe to the channel. Share the joy of the channel with others, starting with giving this video a thumb up. Comment courteously below. I guess that's it. Now, you become a perfected being. Well, yes and no. I guess we have to figure out what we mean by perfect in order to get any more clear and concise than that, any to disambiguate yes and no. Maybe we need to talk about what we mean by perfect. Are there any non-perfect beings? Are all beings perfect? How do we know what counts as perfect in the first place? Can we know about that? That'd be a thing to figure out. Can we know when something is perfect? I would say that if it's true that, as many people say, there's no such thing as perfect, or no human being is perfect, nobody does anything perfectly, or, there are no perfect human beings. Yeah, I said that one. If that's true, then we don't know perfect. Really. We have no experience of it. Therefore, how would we be able to tell when something else is perfect? Will we be able to know when we see something perfect? Do we know what perfect is? I'd say no. If we aren't it, then we don't know it. We wouldn't be able to recognize it. I mean, let's take the planet Saturn. Let's consider astrology and alchemy. What would that be? Alchemical astrology? Astrological alchemy? The planet Saturn. Kind of morose. It stands for human toil, drudgery. It's very heavy and melancholy. And too much Saturn influence, and it can turn a person into very self-involved. Very self-involved. All right. And kind of like self-involved in a kind of a morose way. Very heavy. All right. So we might not like Saturn's influence. Might not want much of that. Does that mean Saturn is not a perfect being? Or is Saturn being perfectly Saturn? To the hilt. Saturn is nothing but Saturn. That kind of thing. We might not want to say that Saturn is a perfect being because Saturn is like a little bit too heavy. Maybe Saturn needs a little bit more balancing out before reaching a perfection level. But then again, Saturn is Saturn. Saturn is 100% Saturn. As far as Saturn goes, Saturn's a perfect being. If Saturn's a being. And I'm suggesting, yeah. I mean, all the universe is alive, right? Any natural structure is alive, has life in it. I mean, given what we call life, life in the atoms, life in molecules, life in planets, Planet has its own atmosphere, has its own aura, has its own astral plane, has its own spiritual plane, has its own material plane, has its own mental plane, has its own history, has its own feel, has its own atmosphere. Literally, atmosphere as well as mental. Well, anyway. If we're going to go with our usual conceptions of perfection, still the answer is yes and no. I mean, is there always room for improvement? Well, that's what I hear. That's what that's what I've heard all my life. There's always room for improvement. Is that true? In one sense, it's true. Yeah, sure. We can always improve on things. Sure. There's no limit. But in time, given time, there's no limit. But what about now? Are there limits right now? Is there a limit? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I have limitations. But have I ever done anything perfectly? I think I have. Some things I've done with no errors, no delays, efficiently, effectively, correctly, no glitches, no mistakes, no misjudgments. Also, I've done such things with it in mind that there's nothing else that I'm doing but what I'm doing. It's for the universe. Just following along with my duty to the universe. No results in my mind. Nothing in it for me, even if there was. Wouldn't on my mind. I had the right attitude toward it, the right thinking. My emotions were involved in it. It felt good. All of that. Made no mistakes. If I was using a hand tool, I did it just right. If I was turning in a screw with one hand, a screwdriver, I didn't slip once, nothing. No pain in my wrist, nothing happened, everything went just right. And I guess I did that perfectly. Given my limitations at the time, given the limits, I'm not bionic, right? I'm not, I don't know. I guess I could have done it faster if I do that all the time, if I've been doing it for 6 months every day, 6 hours straight every day. I guess I'd be pretty damn fast at that. But those are not the circumstances. That wasn't a state of affairs when I guess, did this thing, right? But I did it perfectly. Right then, I did that perfectly. So, yes, things can be done perfectly. I'm going to say yes. But is there room for improvement? Yes. Given time for improvement. So yes and no. And that's how I explain that. So is there a point at which you become a perfected being? Well, let's go back to talking about Saturn again. Yes and no. Saturn could be improved upon because given enough time, yeah, sure. Saturn may improve. Improvement, there is room for improvement, as long as there's time for improvement, right? But is Saturn being Saturn perfectly right now? Yeah. Then we're beings also, so the answer is the same for us. Is time needed for this? Yeah. Is there some point at which every part of you, every aspect of you constantly, all the time, will be perfect? Given enough time, I guess so. That would be about probably at the same time as all other beings have reached that point. I guess. I don't know. I'm not in the future. I don't know the answer to that. If I provided one, there'd be time for that answer to change too. Other factors might come in that we don't even know of yet, or don't even exist yet. Well, perfected being. Do we become a perfected being because of our effort? Well, no, and time is needed. Like I said, I mean, time would be needed for something like that. But that's almost a matter of, some rather conceptual thinking, like almost a thought experiment to imagine such a state. But nonetheless, there are things that hold us back, limits. One of them, a big one, the big one, is we're part of our own causal chain. We're caught in, we are in our own karmic web. We have a lot of effects yet from previous lifetimes, that would be karmic, or just causal, effects from this lifetime, cause and effects from this lifetime, karmic results, karmic manifestations, outcomes from prior incarnations, yet to happen. Our state of affairs right now is a result of all that's come before and everything we thought. Our entire history. And we are in a causal chain of our own. We're also in the causal chain of the earth, of humanity, many levels. Much still to be worked out, like alarms to ring that were set a long time ago. For us to be a perfected being, perhaps it would be a requirement that all of those things are worked out. Well, there's another bit of hard to imagine. But for right now, if we're doing things with the right motives, the right concentration, the right efficiency, and the right reasons, no errors. Look, we might say, well, nobody does anything perfectly. Everybody makes mistakes. Does that mean we're constantly making them? Isn't there just some sequence of things that we can engage in doing that don't have, in which there aren't any mistakes right then? You can say, oh, I made a mistake. And then you keep on going. Oh, there I made another mistake. See, I'm not doing anything perfectly. Well, what about between the mistakes? Is there some time frame we're supposed to be talking about here? The only way to do something perfectly is to do it perfectly for 5 minutes. That's not part of the idea here. No. Do we automatically become a more perfect being when we, let's say, finally make it to being able to count to 100 mentally with no thought intruding at all? No other thought than the counting the whole time. Quite a task if you've ever tried it. Harder than you think at first, or for the first 1 or 2 times through that. And then it becomes, you become aware of, oh my God, there are many more thoughts going on in my head at all the time than I even imagined. As soon as you find yourself in a position to notice that, because it's getting in the way, well, how about the first time you actually make it from 1 to 100 with no distracting thoughts at all, no side thoughts, no thought even about how well you're doing with counting mentally from 1 to 100 with no other thought in mind at all but the counting. First time you even wonder, if you even wonder, have a flash of a thought like, I'm doing good. That's a distracting thought. That's some thought other than the counting itself. All right. The first time you actually can do it, does that mean you have reached a level of perfection now? That you're a perfected being? At the moment, you did something perfectly. Does this mean you've changed? Yeah. You'll be able to think more clearly and focusedly from that on. But the whole idea of perfection is a very relative matter. You can always say yes and no to it. I wouldn't get caught up on it. Wasn't even thinking about it if I were you. I'm reaching a more perfected state. Oh, that's just false ego talking. Yeah. I guess everybody wants to be perfect all the time. I guess. I don't know. I guess it'd be kind of cool to say something like, perfection is a process, not a goal. I don't know. Some rather saint-like gurus or whatever, saints, have been known to do some pretty strange things that people would say are far from perfect. Like as a person. There was this one, he got put in jail for something. I don't know what. No big deal, right? He's put in jail for something because he was following his beliefs about things and, happened to tread across the boundaries of the law a little bit in doing something. So he was in jail for, 30 days or whatever. But he knew how to relocate. Relocate, like instantly, his body, I mean, he could go from here to there, like dematerialize and rematerialize, at least by the appearance of things. Like, whoop, he's not there now. Oh, wow, he's over there. Well, hell. That kind of thing. They'd be found wandering up on the roof of the jail. The building. He'd been in his cell, locked in. Suddenly, somebody sees him up there walking around. They get him. He'd come peacefully. He'd put back in his cell. Next thing you know, he's up on the roof walking around again. Happened repeatedly. He just liked to walk around on the roof, I guess. He wasn't escaping. He's just walking up on the roof, looking at the stars or whatever. Getting some fresh air. He's walking on the roof, where they're probably least likely to find him. But he's on the property. He didn't escape. He can't escape from the roof. He's just up there walking around. And they take him back down. He did it numerous times. It was a frequent affair. All right, so would you say, that's not very good. That's not a very perfected being. He's just like messing with the law, But maybe he saw a good reason for it. Who knows? We don't know. But is his character imperfect? It's better to stay away from assessments like that and stay away from considering whether you're perfect or not. You just get yourself all screwed up. The answer is yes and no. Leave it at that. You want to analyze the whole thing? Well, this video kind of did. Leave it at that. It's not really something to be very concerned about. Yes and no. So, if you had that question, does any of this eventually lead me to a state of perfection? Yes and no. And by the way, which one are you now? Perfect or imperfect? Well, both. That's all there is to say about it. That's all you need to know. All right? So don't get hung up on it. If you were hung up on it, or you ever have a tendency to get hung up on it, well, if that happens, you can remember this video. You know what'll help you remember it better? If at the same time you subscribe to the channel and activated the notification bell feature. Now, if you shared the joy of the channel with others by giving this video a thumb up, these things will help you remember it more. Make a courteous comment below. That'll help you remember it more when you really need it. So there you go. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Well, thank you for selecting this video on becoming perfect or not. I'm Thuranki Ramachandran. This is Thuranki Ramachandran. I'm Turk Strongman. That's the way it is. Be well.